Hello, this will be the 2023 Calculator Applications Region Test. I will be going through all the questions on the test, all the word problems, and the geometry problems in order to hopefully explain them in a way that you can understand. Let's begin. Starting off with the easy first 10 problems. Number 6 was the sum of 93 and the negative square root of 5,790. All you do is do 93 and then subtract or add the negative square root of 5790, as you can see here. What is the result of squaring this value right here? Put that value in the calculator and square it. Calculate the remainder of 7,020 when divided by that number right there. Well, what you do is you divide it by that number, then you subtract the whole number that comes after it. So in this case, it would be not 9,152, and then you multiply it back by 0.6767 because you're basically this whole number is the actual answer, and the remaining part after that would be the remainder. Number 9, 871 is your radius. You want the circumference. Well, circumference of a circle is 2 pi r. Put that in your calculator. Get 5.74 or 47 times 10 power to 3. Number 10, uh, area of a parallelogram. Area of parallelogram, base times height. So 0.449 times your unknown x value is equal to 0.0971. You should be putting these stuff like this in EQ solver so you don't mess up any on hand. Go to math, scroll up, numeric solver, and put in the equation. And if you do that, you get 0.216. If Donnie's school trip takes 4.6 minutes and the school is 2.5 miles at home, what's the average velocity? Well, velocity or speed is distance over time. Your distance is 2.5 miles. Once it in miles per hour, so your time is 4.6 over 60 hours, which is how you convert minutes to hours. So if you put that in your calculator, you'll get 32.6 miles per hour. 17. How many seconds has a person lived on their 16th birthday? Well, 16 years, multiplied by 325.25 days, multiplied by 24 hours, 60 minutes, and 60 seconds, to get a grand total of 5.05 times 10 power to 4 seconds lived. Promoter has 1,000 flyers to hand out. It takes them an hour and 52 minutes to do it. How many were distributed each minute? Rate is total amount over time. So it is 1,000 over how many minutes it took, which is 1 times 60 plus 52 for 112 total minutes. If you do that, you get 8.93. Okay, 19. This is simply Pythagorean theorem. C squared minus A squared equals B squared. Square root of this stuff right here, and you'll get your answer of 7.62. 20. Area of a triangle. Area of a triangle is base times height. The base in this case is cosine of this angle times this hypotenuse, and the height is sine of that angle times this hypotenuse. So that is visualized here, 0.717 times sine of x multiplied by cosine of x times 0.717, all over 2 because it's a triangle. And if you do that, you get an angle of 54.8. If you get an angle that's around like 35.2, you're not keeping in track that the angle has to be greater than 45 because this side is longer than this side. Moving on. 26, a goat is tied to a straight fence with a 20-foot leash 8 feet away from a gate. What is the goat's grazing area if it's left open? This is a bit hard to visualize, but basically what you have going on is you have a giant semicircle up here that represents the distance the gate can go without bothering the fence or the gate at all, fence at all. So you find the area of that, and then 8 feet this way, while you still have 12 more feet remaining, you can now go behind the area that was bait or fenced off. So now you have another semicircle like right here. Or really, it's more like this is the center, and then it goes that way, and then it's like that now. So as you can see, I would actually, you know what? Yeah, it's literally, no, it goes past the most accurate example would probably be something like this, where the gate is right here, and then now you can go on this side. So you have a semicircle with a radius of 12 and a semicircle with a radius of 20. Area of a circle, radius squared times pi, divide by 2 because they're semicircles, add them together, and you get 855 feet. This random dude set a world record for a marathon running that far and that time. What is his velocity? Velocity is distance over time, distance in miles over time in hours. Convert all these things to miles, yards to feet to miles, and dividing by the average time. 2 hours plus 1 minute converted to hours plus 39 seconds converted to hours. If you do that, you get 12.93. There are 4 SDs because everything's being multiplied, basically. You're basically converting it to all one unit, which means you are keeping this lowest 4 SDs right here. 28, Dan types at 50 words per minute. Shayla types at 65 words per minute. Dan types Moby Dick, and after some amount of time, Sheila joins him. The book is finished 40 hours after Dan started. How long after they started did Sheila join him? Well, let's figure out how many pages Dan did. We know it was finished 40 hours after he started, so he spends 40 hours. 40 hours times 60 to convert to minutes, and he does 50 words per minute. So that's Dan's contribution. And then Sheila's contribution is similar. 65. She does 65 words per minute, which means she does that many times 60 words per hour, and some unknown amount of time took place before she was able to start, which is 40 minus x here. Then that value is equal to 209, 117. So 40 minus x represents the amount of time Sheila worked on the book. And that value, if you put in EQ solver, will yield 17.1. 29, cube, total surface area. There are 6 squares on a cube. Side squared times 6, 172. 30, volume of a pyramid is the base, which is 59.1 squared, times the height over 3. We don't know the height, and that value has to be equal to 33,000. EQ solver yields 28.3. 46, population of Mineral Wells, Texas was that much. In 2020, it was that much. What is the percent decrease in population? Percent change is new minus original over original. So I actually wrote this wrong because I am being dumb. But yes, this is what you would use to find out the percent change. New minus original over original. And since it's asking for the percent decrease, you have to flip it. You'll get a negative number here. But since they're wanting percent decrease, the answer is positive. So if you do that, you get 6.899%. I forgot to add since it's a percent, you multiply by 100. And it's 4 SDs because it's based on these two numbers subtracted from each other. And that is a 4-digit number with 4 significant digits. Therefore, the answer is 4 significant digits right here. 37, algae in a fish tank doubles every 20 hours. How long would it take to grow 10 times the original population? In this case, you take the log base 2 of 10. So how many times would it have to double, basically, to reach 10 times the population? Once you have that, you multiply it by your 28 hours it takes to double. and divide by 24 to convert to days. Once you do that, you get 3.88 days. 38, the circle's circumference may be approximated by sum of n equally straight line segments. What is n if the error in the perimeter calculation falls just within 1% of the circumscribed circle area? Well, in this case, it's best to assume the radius is 1. The radius doesn't really matter in this case because everything's based on multiplication. So the circumference of a circle is radius times 2 times pi. The estimated perimeter has to be 99% of the original one, so that's where that 0.99 comes from. And then each side is represented kind of like this, where this angle right here is 180 over the total number of sides, because in actuality this entire thing combined has to be 360 degrees of any total degrees of a circle divided by the number of sides. So it's 180 or 360 over those number of sides over 2 to get this angle right here. And then your sine or your hypotenuse is 1, so it's simply sine of that value multiplied by 2 because it's dual-sided, and then multiplied by the actual number of sides of the inscribed polygon. So as you can see here, we did that right here. Sine of 180 over x times 2 times x. And if you do that, you'll get a value that's basically 12.9. You have to round up for it to, because it can't be less than, or it has to fall within those calculations. So it has to be greater than, more or less error. And that, yeah. 39, pair circ, go to your triangle program, do the pair circ program we have. This it's given that it's an isosceles triangle, so this side is 1550. Plug in each of the sides, search for the inscribed radius, and you get 449. 40. This is another triangle program. Use SSS, put in all the sides, and get the value that would oppose this side right here. And if you do that, you get 0.399. 46. TV sets are sized by the diagonal length of the viewing screen. TV depth varies linearly with the size. If the 32-inch TV costs that much, estimate the cost of an 85-inch TV. Cost is proportional to volume. Okay, first off, let's talk about the area in front, that kind of the part of the TV you would actually see. That is the size is based off the hypotenuse, which is based on a linear expansion of each side. Therefore, the increase in area is based on this side squared. Change that side squared. However, we also have to account for the TV depth, which varies linearly with this linearly varying size. So as a result, you have to multiply the change again, so it is a cubed value. So you take the difference, or the multiplicative difference, you cube it, and you multiply it by the original cost. And if you do that, you get 2436.41. 47, cost of pork belly varies monthly. At the beginning, in January, it was that much. February, it was that much. March, it was that much. And April, it was that much. Calculate the percent error in the extrapolated value for May if the actual value was 109.58. Okay, let's say in this case you should probably assign the month of January to be equal to 0. So you can put in 0, 1, 2, and 3 into X or L1. Then you have your 4 Y values that can go into L2. Go to Stat, Calculate Linear Regression, and store the regression in Y1. And then do Y1 of 4. If you were starting at 0, that would be what the value of May was. And then subtract it from and then you do actual, or then you do the equation for percent error, which is estimated, which is going to be your linear regression minus actual all over actual. So if you do that and multiply by 100, you get 4.55%. 48, this goes straight into EQ solver. You actually don't even need a positive guess for this. Just put this into equation solver and solve for M, and you get 6.58. Very simple. Okay, 49. This case, it is the length of the side does not matter because everything is proportionally based. If they don't give you a value, it is irrelevant. Or if they don't give you a value and don't ask you to solve for it, it is irrelevant. In this case, you should do an SSS of each of the three sides. If the side length is 1, this side over here is going to be solved with Pythagorean theorem. 0.5 that way squared plus 1 up squared. This one side over here is the same, so you get those. And then you also have this third side, which is 0.25 in that direction, or 0.5 in that direction, and 0.5 in that direction. That's where you get your last side from. And then you look for the angle that goes to this side right here, because it's the one opposite of this side. If you do that, you get an angle of 36.9. 50 is a pretty difficult one, all things considered. It's best to start with figuring out I guess I'll just go from the beginning and show my methodology. I first assumed that the cube had a side length of 2. It does not actually have a side length of 2, but we can use it to figure out the proportional value of this right here. So once you know the side length is equal to 2, you know that the volume of the cube is equal to 0.6 times the volume of both cones. So, where did I put it? Yeah, 2 cubed is equal to your radius, which is 1 in this case, squared times pi, times this unknown x value that we're looking for, over 3 because it's a cone. There are 2 cones, and it is given that is 0.6 times the volume. Once you do that, you can solve for x. You can now see that x plus 1 would be proportional to this y value here. But we need to figure out what that proportion is. Well, we know that if you drew a triangle here, these would be isosceles triangles with a hypotenuse, meaning that one side is AB over square root of 2. So y is equal to 4.97 over square root of 2. You can use that to figure out your k value right there. And once you have that k value, you can figure out the actual volume of the cube. You started by assuming it's 2. Now you know the actual proportion factor. So you can multiply 2 by that, cube it, and then you can do the same thing again and divide by 0.6 because you're given that that's representative of the volume of both cubes in terms of the volume, or both cones in terms of the volume of the cube. If you do that, all that, you will get a total volume of 2.32. Might have been a bit of a underwhelming explanation, but simple. You can solve a lot of these problems by making assumptions and then correcting those assumptions later. 56, this is pretty simple. D over dx, plug in your equation, figure out what x value it's equal to 20 with EQ solver. Put a guess, it's like in the middle of those two values, so pi over 12, and you'll get 0.391. 57, a string is cut, or a piece of string is that long, cut into two pieces. One is a circle, one is an isosceles right triangle. And what is the circle diameter if the sum of the two areas is minimized? So if the sum of the two areas are minimized, that means the derivative at that point, you can kind of imagine the area of each object given how much is given to one object and another. You can see that the minimum will have a derivative of 0 for that equation. So now we just got to figure out what that equation is. So let's assign x to the amount of string that is going into the circle. The circle is made by using the perimeter, so you have to convert the circumference or the perimeter into the radius. or circumference over 2 over pi gets the radius. Then you can square that value, multiply by pi, and that's the area of the circle. And now all the string that is not going to the circle has to go to the isosceles right triangle, as you can see here. And then given the isosceles triangle, this side right here can be given by dividing the perimeter of that by each of the sides combined, which would be 1 proportionally, which would be 1 this way, 1 that way, and square root of 2 that way because of an isosceles triangle. And once you do that, you will, why is that? Yeah, okay. So you have that, you will have finished that problem part of the equation. And now you know that what one of the sides is. So you square it and divide by 2 because it's a triangle. And if you do that, sign it to equal to 0, find your x, and then that's the amount that's given to the circle. So the diameter is the circumference over pi. So divide the answer x you get by pi, and you get 6.69. 58 was to determine the product of these two matrices. Just put these two things into matrices, second matrix, put in all the values, multiply them together, and then find the determinant, matrix, math, determinant, or DET. And if you do that, you'll get negative 1.31 times 10 powered to 5. 59, this is going to be an OXOR problem, your 59. Your two equations are going to be x sine of x, and they aren't giving you another equation. They're bounded by the x-axis, so your second equation is y equals 0. You got to find the x-intercepts because the no input will get a value that's way over here and not what we want. The no input makes guesses at negative 10 and 10, so while the 10 will get the correct bound, the negative 10 will get some random value over here that's not correct. So all you have to do is simply assign y1 is equal to 0 and find into EQ solver and find the x-intercepts. Now you can use the OXOR program. You do have inputs now. Put in both of those bounds. The line number is irrelevant, and you'll get a hatched area of 15.7. 60. The area of the isosceles triangle is that much. What is this side right here? Well, since it's an equilateral triangle, or the entire thing is an equilateral triangle as given up here, this value x will be equal to a side over 2 times square root of 3. So that is the height of the triangle. And now the area of a triangle is width times height over 2, as you can see here. And that has to be equal to 40.8. And if you do that, you get a value of 6.37. 61, a flight leaves at 4:45 and arrives at 9 a.m. If the plane velocity is that much and the distance is that much, how many 1-hour time zones were crossed? Well, the difference in time, you have to convert AM to PM, so you have to add 12 to it, in a way, to your ending time. So 9 plus 12, then subtracted by the time you started, is 4.75, and that's going to give you the amount of hours the time zones say you cross. Now, the actual amount of time you spent on it is going to be equal to your distance over speed, as shown here. That's the definition of time given distance and speed. And if you subtract that value, you'll figure out the discrepancy or how many time zones were crossed. And if you do that, you will get 7 1-hour time zones being crossed. Virus population of 100 viruses doubles every 10 seconds. What is the virus population after 300 days? This is your overflow problem. Go to this program. Your base number is going to be 2, and you're going to have to convert 300 days to ratio to seconds and then divide it by 10 seconds because it doubles every 10 seconds. So 300 times 365.25 days times 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds over 10 seconds. And then you also have to multiply the answer you get by 100 or add 2 to this exponent over here because you started with 100 viruses instead of just 1. 63. Randy pitches a rock from top of that far lake. Release velocity and angle are 35 miles per hour and 10 degrees. Sound travels that far. What is the elapsed time from the rock release to Randy hearing the splash? So we have a kinematics program for this, Kine 2D. You're given the y will be, it goes 112 feet down, and then your velocity is 35 in miles per hour. Make sure to convert to feet per second. So 35 over 15 times 22. And then your theta is 10 degrees. So now, once you do that, you'll get a time. The time it takes for the rock to travel will be 2.93. Then you also have to figure out the distance you are from the rock, so you can calculate the amount of time it takes to hear the splash. You use Pythagorean theorem, change in x plus change in y squared plus change in x squared, square root of that, and you divide by 1,100 to determine how long it took. If you do that, you will get 3.10 seconds. Okay, 64, square with rounded corners. Okay, now for this problem, you can imagine that it actually was a complete square. That will be our starting point. So 9.65 squared. Now, now what we're going to do is we're going to remove these segments that are parts of circles from the original square. So those would be squares with a side length of r. So minus 4 squares times r squared. And then we're adding back on the new form of quarter circles, which are radius squared times pi over 4, and then there are 4 of them again. And all that combined has to be equal to 90.8. And if you do that, you'll get an R value of 1.64. 65, okay, 30. So this one is probably the hardest problem on the test. What you got to do is we're going to figure out, first off, what you should notice is that since the hatched area shown is this, and the segment area shown as this, however, both these, if you include this part on both of them, the change in the area would increase by the same amount. Therefore, we can actually ignore this part entirely because it, well, not ignore it, but we can calculate, we can basically have both of these values, hatched area and area of segment, include this value, which makes things easier to calculate. So in this case, the area of the hatched area, well, we start by assuming it's a rectangle. So 33.7 times 2 is your width, and your height is unknown. Then you're subtracting these two parts of the circle. So you need to figure out the angle that's here, which is going to be equal to 90 minus, if you have a 90-degree angle up, you're getting this area, and then you're subtracting 90 from it to get this angle. So 90 minus cosine negative 1 of your x value here over your hypotenuse of 33.7. Definition of inverse cotangent will correctly give you this angle. And then you subtract 90 from it to get this. And now once you have that, the entire circle is 360 degrees. Or an entire circle is 360 degrees. So it's that degree amount over 360 times the area of a circle and multiplied by 2 because there are two identical parts of the circle here. And that value is going to, and in this case, we were able to keep this value because we did not subtract it from the rectangle. And now you figure out the area of this entire thing, which means you have the normal standard area of a circle, and you multiply it by this entire angle over 360 degrees of an entire circle. So cosine negative 1 of x over 33.7, multiply it by 2 because it's dual-sided, and divide by 3 the entire 360 degrees of a circle. And if you do that, you'll get an x value of 26.5. Probably the hardest problem on the test. I would not expect people to get it right, but if you do, good job. You're clearly pretty good at calculator tests. All right, that's the entire test. Well, not the punch problems, but come on, I'm not going to explain those. Well, see you later on the next test. Bye.